I'm just gonna give folks a few seconds to join and then we'll start. All right, great. Greetings, everyone. My name is Johanna Reyes. I am the project lead of the Mapping and Justice Project, and I work with Womantra. Thank you all for coming to this event. This discussion is a key part of the Mapping and Justice Project, as our goal is to have, pertinent discussions on gun violence, police violence, pathways to co-constructing peaceful communities. And I mean, all of those elements, I guess, are very different. But that's the point, is bringing together and making connections between these very different themes and topics, and getting to the root of the problems, and then also figuring out together a way forward, in a solutions-oriented way. So I won't keep you any longer. I would like to introduce our moderator, Mr. Allan Meiguel, an experienced law enforcement professional, an attorney at law and lecturer in ethics in law enforcement, to take us through the rest of our panel proceedings. Okay, thank you, Mr. Meiguel. I'm passing over to you now.
And thank you, Joe, and thank you all for having me. Yes. Now, the topics: hotspot communities, police-involved shooting, and how to build a peaceful community. I rather like how these topics Sunday have lined up, because one naturally goes into the other, and it has to do with the structure of society, especially in relation to law enforcement and the citizen. Now, any community must have borders. In other words, you must identify a boundary. And once there's an internal system of governance, it doesn't matter how simplistic or how complex it is, that can be identified as a community. And community writ large is equal to a country. So what are the unique features of a community or country? Now, the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago is a sort of draft of the most important points that the country wants to be identified by. And I go directly to section 4 and 5 of the Constitution. It says that people who lives within this jurisdiction have certain rights. These rights are freedom of movement, freedom of worship, freedom from persecution and things like that. These are all rights within section 4 of the Constitution. Section 5 goes on to enshrine those rights. And the most important aspect of these rights, the protection of these rights, is that they ought not to be interfered with unless by due process of law. I say that again, due process of law. So you may have the right to freedom of movement. However, the police may, on reasonable cause to suspect that you might be involved in a crime or about to be involved in a crime, they can interfere with those rights. They can detain you if it is they have reasonable cause to suspect. That is what is referred to as due process of law. Now, In order to protect society, we established the police service. The police service is for the protection of the internal aspects of safety in Trinidad and Tobago. For the external, you have the army, the defense force, and so on. But where the citizen may have cause to complain, or where a police officer has cause to complain about a citizen behavior, then that police officer, he's endowed with certain powers. He has the power to take a complaint and take it before a magistrate. Now, let me just jump back a little bit. The way the Constitution is structured, there are three arms of government. You have the judiciary, you have the executive, and the legislature. And one must not encroach on the other. Let me explain what I mean by that. The police form part of the executives, and it is not their role to judge the citizen or to institute punishment. The laws are written by the legislature, and the police merely observes the citizen's behavior and they make a complaint before the judiciary. The judiciary, whether in the form of a magistrate or a judge and so on, will hear the complaint. So it will go something like this. The police will come and say, on date, time, and place, the citizen engaged in this behavior. And then the magistrate sitting in judgment, or the judge, will ask the person, what is your side of the story? So after they hear the complaint from the police, they ask the person, what is your side of the story? And having heard both sides, it is only then that the magistrate will sit in judgment, or the judge will sit in judgment and determine whether in fact the behavior complained of contravenes the law as written by the legislature. It is only then that the magistrate or judge sitting in judgment will determine what is the fit punishment for a person who behaves, whose behavior is called into question and proven to be, in fact, the case. In fact, and in law, the case. So a magistrate may determine that here what, this was offense, they haven't been in trouble before, they have mitigating circumstances, and as such, the recommended punishment will be reduced to a particular level. Or perhaps the behavior is so egregious that the magistrate or judge may find that this person ought to be locked away from society, and that's on the other extreme end. So that is the role of the magistrates and the judges. If it is that the police, as part of the executive, were to institute punishment against its citizen, then that is wrong. Let me put this another way. The police has the power. They have power to interfere in the lives of the citizen. Section 1004 of the Criminal Law Act says that a police officer, once he has reasonable cause, he may arrest somebody who is suspected to be about to commit a crime, who have committed a crime. A police officer may arrest without a warrant. Hear this powers, listen to these powers. May take away the citizen's right without a warrant. Yes, where he has reasonable cause to suspect. A police officer may enter your premises, sometimes without a warrant. So the police has a whole lot of power vis the citizen. So the question that falls naturally for consideration is this. If you have such power, what are the responsibilities that go with that power? You hear the term bellas is a term that I became familiar with not too long ago, where the police find somebody behaving in a certain way and they hit them at bellas, institute punishment against the citizen. That is wrong. So let's frame it this way. The exercise of power backed by authority is the exercise of legitimate power. The exercise of power in the absence of authority is the exercise of arbitrary power. Let me put this into context. What is the role of the police? To protect and serve with pride. Who are they to protect? They are the buffer between the innocent majority and the criminal minority. But is that the reality that we are facing? And this is a question that deserves some serious consideration. Is it that the guards have turned on the citizen? Is it that they're exercising arbitrary power against the citizen? In every community, there is some degree of deviance. The degree of deviance within a community, and deviance is that people who may not conform to the written law. There's some degree of deviance. Where you have hotspot community, and we get drilling down into the topic now, is where it is said, and I, in quotation, that the degree of deviance is such that it requires a law enforcement response. Broad spectrum. There are certain characteristics of communities that is so adjudged to be hotspot communities. They are certainly not in Westmoreland and so on, yeah? And I want to be careful how I choose my words. Certainly, these are quite often challenged communities. These are not affluent communities, and the degree of deviance, there seems to be a positive correlation between challenged communities and a higher degree of deviance. I must be quick to add, that is a textbook definition, because I can provoke you all by saying, if it is that a person take a gun and robs a person of $10,000, and the police run out there and find that person and shoot and so on, what about the people from the other echelons of society, the higher ones, where would perhaps take 10 million out of the coffers of the country? Who is more of a criminal? I'm framing the argument for discussion, all right? So the question of hotspot community, that is a sort of dubious distinction to describe the Trinidad and Tobago. And if it is that we start off by saying that a particular community is a hotspot community, if law enforcement were to continue to fail to address the criminality within a particular community, would it not metastasize into various communities? So you call in Mover, Sealots, and so on, hotspot community. But now we see in Enterprise, we see in Mbakade, we see in San Fernando, and so on. And what about those communities now where perhaps people are paying bribes for heavy ammunition and heavy guns and so on? Are they hotspot communities? I say that to open the discussion, to open the floor, to hear what people think. I'm just framing the arguments, yes? So I'm opening the floor now to discussion, especially on the topic of hotspots community. We'll get into police-involved shooting and how to build a peaceful community, but I open the floor for discussions on this topic. No takers? Jamaal?
Well, I would like to start. I think coming from my background as a sociologist and a social worker and activist, calling a community a hotspot really brings a level of stigmatizing a community before you even go in to understand what the issues are. And you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't understand the community and you already label them because of crimes that you like, visible crimes that you can see. Now, you were talking about, I guess, white collar crime versus blue collar crime, which, violent crimes do have an impact in the media more so than some different types of crime. But if you look at it, Trinidad and Tobago is a hotspot. We are a hotspot. If you think about all the statistics in terms of child abuse, in terms of domestic violence, in terms of all those crimes, white collar crimes, being someone who has worked in the financial sector as well, we are also have been blacklisted for white collar crime and also government corruption. So I think that Trinidad and Tobago is a hotspot. And I don't think that we should single out any particular community, but we should look at the issues. And, if there's a certain sense of vulnerability, look at ways in which we can clearly describe those vulnerabilities and the ways in which that we are going to impact on them, or the ways in which we are going to develop the community. So I think we should definitely move away from the idea of, stigmatizing particular communities as hotspot, because a lot of it is systemic injustice as well. in terms of not all persons are directly responsible for their position. So I think that is something that we definitely need to move away from.
I agree, and historically, the security of the community has been ready to protect the property class, and I'm not so sure that we have moved so far away from that.
Could I interject?
Please.
I don't mind the hotspots over K. I think it keeps it real because it's like changing from Beetham to East Morens and the situation remain the same. There are some obvious things about all hotspots. They belong to a political party that we like to call our party. So I don't know if I'm entitled to call the name, so I'll say it political. Our party. That is one of the correlation with hotspots, right? High unemployment, high crime. I wrote down some things here. And in most hotspots, there's a serious lack of real representation, a serious feeling of disempowerment, and I think a lot of times to address the situation, there needs to be some political intervention, and not just, it's really easy for us to just say the police this and that and the other, and it's really easy also for the police to look at us in a particular way. But 11 of us living in a 2-bedroom house, even in COVID, we're not staying inside. And when we come outside, the police see that as something. So I know everybody got to talk. So I'm saying that I cool for keeping the name, because at least it in the face of the politician, so that he could at least see it in his face and say, nah, boy, I have to do something, because look, Shabazz now make we out there and other people make we out.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Sarge.
I just want to say, I want you all and I want Trinidad and Tobago to understand that policing is really a science. And the term hotspot policing is a term used in when they talk about evidence-based policing, and it really just describes an area of high concentration in a particular crime. So it wasn't something that we in Trinidad and Tobago came up with. It's something that is you look globally in terms of policing as a science. You will come across the term hotspot, and it's in terms of a high concentration of a particular crime happening in a particular geographic location. So it's nothing to do with who in the location, but it's everything to do with about the crime, and that is why the term hotspot is used. So it's nothing to really target any particular group or any ethnicity. It's nothing like that. It's specifically to do with mainly violent crimes such as shootings, probably homicides, such as other serious reported crimes, because crimes are categorized in Trinidad and Tobago. You have from minor offenses, traffic offenses, minor crimes, serious reported crimes, and it's really to describe a concentration of crimes happening within a particular geographic location. Just for clarity.
I have a question for Mr. Small. Mr. Small, when they found the amount of cocaine in West Morenzo, more cocaine that they have found in Beetham and them places, that those places were not classified as hotspots. So, it bothering me.
Yeah.
Let me call a spade a spade.
No, but,
go ahead.
That was, they're describing probably one-off situation. We're talking about something happening in terms of, to see what to categorize them in terms of percentage, right? That you're talking about an instance or a situation, a particular specific situation. But we're talking about something happening over and over and over, and the database in terms of, we have a section called CAPA, Crime and Problem Analysis Branch of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that map crimes and that kind of thing. And the statistics is what's showing the prevalence of a particular crime in an area. So as I say, it has nothing to do with where it's happening or the police want to label. As a matter of fact, we had an initiative just some years ago under Commissioner Williams, a hotspot policing initiative, where in every police division, we have 9 police divisions in Trinidad and Tobago, and in every police division, we had hotspots. And it wasn't only in places where you have serious reported crimes happening, it had other places where you had things like larceny, motor vehicle, different things that will contribute to deeming an area hotspot. And it's not limited, as I say, to Lavantel or Beetham or Enterprise. So you may have seen in that whole hotspot policing approach where other areas, just like similar to where you're calling it would have had hotspot areas identified and that's probably in that same Westmoreland area, but it's not something that may have went public. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the whole situation about that one-off thing with police finding narcotics in a particular area, that went public. But in terms of how frequent was it happening, it probably must be one-off in that particular geographic location. So, it has nothing to do with ethnicity.
Oh, it probably would have been like the first time they find it.
Exactly.
And when you count the amount of what they're finding by week and what they're finding that one fine,
Exactly.
chalk and cheese.
When we dealing with what are the forefront there, what in the darkness we really wouldn't be able to account for.
Okay.
Could it be said that perhaps that type of analysis that brings us to the conclusion that a place is a hotspot, it might be very superficial, especially in terms if you think about the economics of crime. I remember a lecturer once said that statistics is like a bikini. It reveals quite a bit, but it hides the essential. So is this discussion going to be about the labeling of a particular place in order to draw a policing response? Or is it that we're going to look at society and at the broader scope? What is the value of the crime that is committed by a white-collar person as opposed to what's the economics of it? Yes? Is it that, and I'm gonna tease you with this, please don't hold it against me. I was a police officer for 15 years. So let me just put that up front. Is it that our police officers in there, right? This is just an academic argument to tease you. Is it that our police officers come from a particular strata of society, not the highest, because the police service might be an employer of last resort? And do we have confidence then policing the strata in which we can identify with, as opposed to the higher strata? Is it that we don't have confidence? I mean, we have aligned ourselves with international factor and FATF and so on, but do we have the personnel within the police service? And I preface this against the FBI. I've done some work with them, and they blood themselves, meaning that they rank themselves in their ability to bring down people of high stature who has interfered with the public purse. Is it the same in Trinidad and Tobago, or are we comfortable just policing the strata in which we identify with?
Well, to be honest, I want to respond and say the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is an organization that in place to police Trinidad and Tobago. It doesn't matter if it's in Westmoreland or Beetham or Lange Park or Enterprise or wherever. It doesn't matter where. The police, our vision is to make every place in Trinidad and Tobago safe, and our mission speaks to partnering with the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And just for you to understand that back then when police officers were recruited, they didn't need any subjects, CAT subjects. That is, they could have came in the police service with a school evening pass. But now, the academic qualification required is English and 4 subjects. But let me tell you something. Most of the people who are applying to become police officers right now are people with bachelor's degree, masters. It's not the same as long ago when people were just coming in with a school evening pass. We have a lot of qualified people, and one of the things that the police service are undergoing right now as part of the modernization and transformation is placing officers with these special skills and abilities and putting them in sections for them to function and be able to utilize their skill. We have a lot of officers with law degrees, business degrees, science degrees, you name it. So I just want to put that out there.
Anybody else? That was a provocative statement.
Yeah, no, Mr. Small, I wanted to be clear, you are a special officer. Seriously, I hold you in high regard. You remind me of the long-time sergeant in the station who used to solve all the problems. You just have to tell him, I go call the sergeant for you, and everything done. We don't have that. I talking about a rogue, a perceived rogue element in the police service that has possibly become gangsters themselves, you know, and operate with a certain amount of agenda, you know, that, you know, we got to look at carefully, you know, when we analyze all these killings and the whole attitude. That attitude we're talking about with the skills and thing, we see that from hearts and minds. We see that from Oleg. We see that from arms. But we see a gangster in blue, a gangster that will blow boop, boop, and stop Boombi car, right? And he will think it's police, right? A gangster in uniform, and ask to see where I'm pay mask. Let me see your driver's license. And then deal with him as judge, jury, and executioner. That is the police we're talking about. And that is why I think if the police service do address, just the same way, I have to take responsibility when we kill one another in the street, you know, and deal with the so-called heads who call themselves community leaders but are misleaders. The same way the police service have to find a way to deal with the rogue elements that bring in damnation to the service.
Right. And it's no secret that we have officers who were let me just say what we deem as rogue, and the police service had no choice but to, once we have the information, once it is we have the evidence, let me tell you something. They're before the court as we speak. They're in the jail as we speak, because we have officers who won murder charges. You know, you name the offense, and we have officers who probably committed them and before the court or in the jail. So it's not that the police service as an organization endorsing any such behavior. It have a lot of officers, not only myself, but a lot of officers who, you know, really regard the service in a high regard, and you know, is really passionate about this job, and really wouldn't find themselves on the other side of the law. I mean, it's unfortunate, and you know, the part of what the police service trying to do now in terms of modernization and transformation is help, you know, show a different image to the public. You know, help change the public perception about the police. And you know, the reality is that what you have identified there, Mr. Shabazz, is a reality, been a reality, and the police service have done everything through the Professional Standards Bureau, through the complaints department, through the police complaints authority, the complaints authority, you name it. They have all the investigative arms within the TTPS and external that will not tolerate once they have the information. And I challenge anybody, if it is you have information that you know police officers who, as they alleging, are gangsters in blue, pass it on to the police service. We have the online reporting app. We have the 800 tip 55. Any one of the reporting lines, you can do so anonymously, and I guarantee you that you will see action being taken against these officers. Once you have the information and act on it and able to acquire evidence, I guarantee you that you're going to see them before the court.
It begs the question. I'm a little provocative. I'm sorry about that. It begs the question: how effective is it? Can we describe our country as here what the deviance within the police service is restricted to just a minor group, or is it more endemic to the point where we watch the police service and we say here what, you know, we cannot trust that police service. Public confidence in it. You understand? So it's one thing to be cliche and say, well, here what, we have the PCA, we have this, but how effective is it really in putting that? Because police officers are oath takers. They take an oath to protect and serve with pride. And if it is that the confidence of the public is waning or is at an all-time low in the police service, then all the Professional Standards Bureau and the PCA and so on, it may do very to make the public feel as if the police service is there to make us safe. Because remember the contractarian principle. The contractarian principle is that the the governance of a country is to provide safety, and in exchange we provide obedience. Is it that the communities think is of the view that there seem to be no consequence for lawlessness at either strata, any strata in society? How do we measure that? How do we improve that?
I want to say, I want to go back to the 1800s where we have a old police officer by the name of Sir Robert Peel. And he was a politician, he was into everything, but we refer to him as the godfather or the father of modern day policing. And he always used that term that the police are the people and the people are the police. And let me tell you something, the Trinidad and Tobago police, for it to be as effective as it can be, we rely on every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago to relay information. I understand and I acknowledge that persons out there have trust issues, but you cannot throw your hand up in the air and say, because I don't trust some of the officers, I wouldn't work with the police service to rid my community of crime and violence and other community decay that leading to root causes that causing crime in the first place. You have to be willing to want to change things, to work with the law-abiding police officers and citizens that to really get the job done. We have to work hand in hand, and that is why our mission speaks to partnering with the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. That is why our strategic plan, out of the 4 strategic priorities, we have one focused strongly on community partnerships and one focus on public safety. And when it is sessions like these happen and the police have the opportunity to work hand in hand with the people have a better sense of understanding and appreciation for the police and wouldn't broad brush the organization based on a bad experience or based on 1 or 2 bad information in terms of instances of police misconduct to judge a whole organization. If it is we were to do that, we would look left and right and we would look at all the sphere of society and we will find reasons to blame and to say we don't trust them and we don't want to work with them. But that is not the case. It's so unfortunate that the police just had to take all the blows for probably everybody some of the times. But at the end of the day, if it is we don't get the information from the public, our ability to really treat with particular things that are happening. If you remember, the police officer not in the community 24/7. Some of us not living there. So it is really dependent on the people in platforms like neighborhood watch groups and other community groups to bring forth the information that the powers that be could treat with the situations in which you're describing. But we cannot throw our hands in the air and say, you know what, we feel all the police and them corrupt. We ain't working with no police, but we results proven over and over and over. Bring the information and watch the amount of guns that the police seizing. Watch the amount of drugs. Go and Google the statistics and you will see for yourself how many recovery of firearms, and we couldn't do it without the public. So you cannot say ultimately that the public not working with the police, and we cannot say ultimately that we don't trust all the police, because the results are there to prove that once we have the information, we're going to go out there, get the guns, and make sure that everywhere is safe and keeping it to our vision.
I'm glad that all that has been said, Mr. Small, Sergeant Small. Based on the fact, because I'm coming from a place where, as an activist, I'm the face and the person that comes behind trans people. I'm the president for the Trinidad and Tobago Transgender Coalition, and also for women and trans women that do sex work. We all know what comes behind that. Now, we all know it's illegal, but coming from a space where the law does not protect us, the LGBTI people, because of the Equal Opportunities Amendment, the police already see us as deviants. And seeing that they have seen you, that they see you as a deviant, it comes with a host of different things in terms of being very disrespectful, being, feel they have that right to treat any individual or because you are not protected. No law is protecting you as an individual because you identify to come from a space or a group of persons where there's no protection and they could discriminate against the LGBTIQIA communities. The police has already, they think that they have that right because they already see you first as a deviant. Now, I'm hearing all what you say about all the different techniques and trainings and all the different, all of this. Up to earlier on this year, I was in a space where an officer was being very abusive and didn't know who I was, and very, very verbally abusive. And now, when you do that, how do you want me to come to you to share information? And after he be so abusive, about 4 days after, a car run into my wall, and he was the same said officer, together with the group, came to get information because the bandits run and left the car. After he was being 4 nights ago, he was abusive. At one time abusive, it was like, I said, who this man really think he talking to? And they jump out of the van, and who is you? I just choose not to answer. Um, I see I said to all run inside there and this and that. I said, and what is it that, what does people running in a yard has to do with you? And someone was parked in the road, and if you see the interrogation, let me see ID, let me see this, you know what kind of people living here, and this and that and the other. 4 days after, only to find out who when he came now, when the bandit ran and left the car, the same group of people came back with some other police. And I had to share my credentials, and he looked at me and said, I'm really sorry for being so a bit, but that was the time you gave a wrong impression the first time. Because of the fact that he knows that there is no protection for you, he can do that. The police have a way that once you no law, no protection, no this, we don't want to hear anything about you. You know, it's and that was just understanding his point, because the lack of protection for the LGBTI community. And my question to him is about, I said, hello, but you could have come in as, you could have approached differently. Your approach should have been differently, not like that. Because you could have come like, asked who is here, who is in charge, and you would have gotten information. But when you come like that, when you approach like that, and you want to bring, this kind of, I made up my mind I was not going to answer you, and you could have done all what you want out there. I in my space. And if you didn't believe this is my space, that is your problem. And I have been, from time to time, to ask persons to respect everyone and to treat everyone fairly. I think the sensitization and the training is so much. And what you're saying is that you have people coming with degrees and all these different things into different spaces. Where are the training? Where the sensitization and training for they to start to deal? And I'm not only speaking about the LGBTI people that has no protection, for any human in general, because I see the police in different spaces, the way how they treat people publicly, the way how they talk to you, and and they want you to respond and to be friends with them. That's not the way. The sensitization and the training has to be, and it must be mandatory, and it has to be it must have some laws in place to make sure that there's a place to actually report these things, because police they abuse people verbally, and that's against your human rights. And these are, and I just wonder if they know about human rights, and if does human rights count. I hear Allan Meiguel in the beginning talked about human rights. I've been, because they talked about human rights, but I think honestly the human rights is not just for anyone. It's for some people, not everyone. And this is the issue. This is the information that needs to be shared out there. I understand that the fact that they have all kind of things in place. You talk about the crime, the issue in Westmoreland, the kind of drugs this country have, the kind of things that we read on the news every day, and the kind of guns that these people have. Where these little poor people getting money to buy that? Where it coming from? Well, how they beat them full of it? They think it dropped from the sky and an angel hand them? No, it didn't. It came from somewhere. And you all need to do all your job and train all your people to do all your job and start to think about how could we cooperate with citizens of Trinidad and Tobago in a better light. Because I remember my experience is only just just December gone there when the car ran into the wall and the man came back to me 4 days after. And when I went to the station now, he know who I was now as an activist. He didn't know the night when he run here inside the house in the yard. And and start to get one so aggressive. You want me to share information with you and be partnering with you, and that's your attitude. We have to do better. We need to train our police. Somebody has to work with the police, let them understand. Even though we are not protected, I must say again, the Equal Opportunities Bill does not protect the LGBTI persons. We still are humans and we need to have the cooperation with the police. And there must be some sensitization and training for you to understand me as a trans woman and how my pronouns and how I identify and all these different small issues, because 90% of the trans women that is in Port of Spain who are living homeless have 5 and 10 and 15 parrot charges. They can't get a passport to even go if they had one to go to Tobago. Their track record is so dirty for petty charges like loitering and vagrancy and soliciting, charges that's supposed to be wiped off the book. You have people suffering with these things going in front of the court, wasting money time after time after time after time, making a human being cannot even get a visa to go somewhere because of. And when you watch the charges, 15 times you get locked up for loitering, 10 times for soliciting. How much time you went in jail for and what you went to jail for? Look at these things. Why are you all creating these things when they should be doing things to help these vulnerable and marginalized community? Where is the cooperation? Because the laws say you are a deviant, don't have any protection. We have to look at things differently.
Right. So I want to really, from my heart, as a human being, as a police officer, apologize, on behalf of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that you had to face such an ordeal. It was really unfortunate. And the laws and the policies of the organization do not promote that kind of behavior, do not promote that kind of discrimination. And let me tell you, the police officers that are recruited into the police service, whether it's in the teaching service, whether it's in the fire service, whether it's in the defense force, they coming from society. And sometimes culture and the way people see things have a lot to do with how they respond to things, even in the police service. And as you highlight, and you're correct, you see training and retraining and training and retraining is the direction that the police service is going in right now in terms of professional development of our own officers, and customer services. When I came into the police service in 2003, I did customer service training. We have customer service rep in all the police stations, and the police service as an organization real big on customer service. And what is unfortunate that we have not all the officers embracing this. And let me tell you, any officer that impolite to you, being impolite to a member of the public is really a breach of discipline. It's something that you can report, and action can be taken. And I don't endorse that at all. And to be honest, I too went through a personal experience where I was stopped for a basic, probably traffic stop, and the way that the officers treated me, I didn't even feel that I had to say that I'm a police officer for them to treat me a particular way. But if you're stopping someone for as simple as a traffic stop, good day, you ask for a person's driver's permit and insurance, and they produce that because I did produce my documents and whatever. What is the problem? At the end of the day? So I understand and I can relate to what you're saying, and I only draw my personal experience in that one instance to say that it does have officers that really need to understand that customer service is as important as if a person going into the bank or to any building or organization or business, you should be treated with respect. You should be treated politely. And I will never endorse any police officer or anybody at all in society treating people a particular way because of their ethnicity or because of their preferences or because of that sect that they belong to. I don't support that. And the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service doesn't support that either.
There's a distinction between the is proposition and the ought proposition. The ought proposition is the value that we ought to ascribe to. But what is the reality? And we have to be careful that we don't polish this, yes, in such a way that we keep saying what ought to be, like, for example, the respect that ought to get, and what is the reality of it. Because I can give you a few stories myself, about my interaction with police officers. And out of all of them, I could give you one. The officer who gave me the ticket, I almost shook his hand because he was so polite. But by and large, yes, the interaction is so negative, yes. I sat on the Diosaran committee that looked into the manpower audit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And one recurring theme that we discovered was the absence of leadership. And Sergeant Small, you did allude to that development of policy and training, because leadership is the ability to change a culture. And what we found in the police service was an absence of leadership, so that the culture has stayed stagnant. And here the risk of that is that if you have somebody who come and say, this is what ought to be, this is what ought to be, this is what ought to be, and there's little change, then people get numb. We hear that already. Yeah? So how do we lift the police service? And I propose that it must be the identification and development of certain policy positions. And forgive me for saying this, but I remember when Iwatsky and Gibbs were here, and I actually saw where they wanted to carry this police service by having these model stations and so on, in which you can get in. That is an ought station. This is what it ought to be. And the idea was to roll it out so that the culture, you'd have a culture change. The question is, we know what ought to be, but is it what we experience as citizens when we interact with the police, or is it a bruising encounter more often than not?
Yeah. Well, it's not an overnight fix, but I want to again reiterate the fact that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is undergoing a rigorous transformation. And one of the particular leadership style that I have personally identified in this strategic plan, you should look at it, is transformational leadership. And the ability to have even the officers at the lowest level understand the vision of the service, understand the direction that the service is heading into, and we are part of that transformation. We are part of that change that we want to see. So, as I say, the organization doing its part to ensure that the perception of the police service change, and through the leadership style in particular, this transformational leadership style, it really paving the way for the youngest police officer in the training academy to understand that the police service will not tolerate, will not accept these types of behaviors. And as I say, if it is you experience any kind of impoliteness on behalf of any police officer or in interaction with any police officer in the public, or whether you go to a station or whether it's happening on the road, I encourage you to report it. And don't just say I had a bad experience and leave it just like that. Report it and allow the discipline process to take effect. And that officer who think you speak to the public however you want or deal with the public however you want, you have to answer to somebody. This is a discipline organization. It have reporting lines. And if it is you feel like you talk to a corporal or a sergeant and they didn't get any redress, you could go all the way up to the commissioner of police. And if it is you feel that you don't want to report something directly to the service, you could go to the complaints authority where they will have an independent investigation and your situation will be addressed because the service is not tolerating that type of behavior.
Is there anybody else on this topic?
I think that it's always nice to see people reported, but I'm coming from the perspective of when we did our interview with patients in the community who made reports to the police complaints authorities. And if you look at the newspaper today, there's a person who had to gather lawyers to bring the topic to the newspaper to get the police campaign authority to do something. There's also the point where persons who would have made a report and would have won the case and gotten the officer dismissed or, disciplinary action. Some of them were killed. Now, this is coming from some of their family members that you have to. So it's not to the point where you can just come out and report something that could actually be killed for doing so and when you actually will not be matter. So I think that, we need to look at also how and what powers the police complaint authority actually has and what actually happens in real life. And I think that we need to what protection is there for people who make reports. Because some of the officers would have gotten the information as to who made the report or whatever and came to the person's house, right? So things like that is something that, yes, it'll be easy to say, yeah, make a report, but some people care for their life, and how do we change that? What is the policy? What is the transformation they're going to see there? The patients will have been there, and a lot of extrajudicial killings, the patients who were the victims had on those matters with police officers. So where do we go from there? And this is from real life interviews I'm talking about the patients that we would have assisted.
Mr. Moderator, if I may,
Please,
can I jump in?
please.
Okie doke. Good evening, and I want to acknowledge all of my fellow panelists, but I need to really say hello and shout out my brother Jamaal Shabazz, who I've known for a long time. We've been in the trenches together for a long time and had some interesting life-changing experiences. So I know where he's coming from, and I know that he can represent. And of course, my brother Jacey Small, who I've met in his professional capacity and who I'm very fond of. I'm just thinking, however, that we, in discussing policing or trying to kind of deconstruct the police and policing, for me, the context has to be what the institution itself was set up for. When I think of or talk about policing, I remind myself that the police most times encounter us at our worst. We're either in our most vulnerable state as victims or in our most combative and sort of ruthless state as the perpetrators. Historically and presently, the police keep order and maintain law. Law enforcement exists because people commit crimes. And so the relationship between the police and the population, particularly certain populations, and we talked earlier about the hotspot communities. I think in coming to an understanding of policing in our context in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to take into account the fact that the police also have the power to change our circumstances and affect our lives in ways that are good and ways that are not good as well. I always remind myself when I deal, as I was listening to Brandy, when I deal with police officers, the police officers belong to a powerful institution, which our moderator referred to in his opening remarks. And I deliberately would say belong because belonging really gives one, the institution and the culture of the organization really becomes part of the individual's DNA. So that I don't separate the police officer from the police institution at all. There is nothing ordinary about the police institution, not its size, not its mandate, its influence, not its culture. So I think it is important to acknowledge that whether it's a constable or commissioner, a police officer has control over us through legislation and resources, etc., etc., etc. And so the power of the institution and therefore the representatives of the institution cannot be underestimated. particularly given the changes, and Sergeant Small referred to some of those changes from the 1890s, for example, when it really was a disgrace for someone to be a member of the police force, as it was referred to in those days, to where it is today. You know, a well-resourced organization, populated with academically qualified officers, as Sergeant Small pointed out to us, with extensive experience in a specialized field of work, grounded in legislation in a sector that has no competition. And it's still wedded to our colonial past in many ways. It is my view that the TTPS is a powerful organization that is largely not accountable to anyone. And so we cannot divorce the police institution from its early colonial roots, such as the reactive, traditional, sort of paramilitaristic approach of that colonial period that really alienates the public and largely really violates people's rights, people's human rights, as we were told earlier in other submissions. And therefore that philosophy of us versus them is central to the culture of the police as an organization. And now we have more, I think, a stronger sort of push towards the paramilitarization of the organization, which of course has been facilitated by this fight against transnational crime and terrorism and so on and so forth. And these days we even have paramilitary uniforms, right? I don't think that I am well placed to speak about change and transformation in the TTPS. But I think that some of the areas of kryptonite are its philosophy, its culture, and its leadership. And we just started talking about leadership. And so I would like to see really, stronger and more systemic and committed attempts by the TTPS to really, when Sergeant Small talks about the mission of the organization is to partner with the community for us to formalize those arrangements, to systematize those arrangements so that the residents and communities, for example, you have the Station Action Council. And the Station Action Council is supposed to be an opportunity for residents to engage with the police in their particular police station around crime fighting. What I have found with the Station Action Council, for example, is that it becomes a space where selected residents can come to complain about things that are affecting them. It really has not evolved into crime control, planning, and management unit or mechanism that really would ensure that the strategic, what is in the strategic plan of the TTPS becomes a reality. What you have happening is a Station Action Council. Yes, we have them, and you tick a box in your strategic plan. So that for me, I never divorce the police officer who presents in front of me from the institution that person represents. Yes. And the foundation of that institution, the philosophy, its culture, and its management and leadership. And that is what I think that we really need to unpack, because otherwise what we find ourselves doing is coming up against misbehavior by this officer and impoliteness by another one, and so on and so on and so forth. And we do not really challenge the core of the institution, that is its philosophy. And for me, how do we as activists, as a population, challenge a philosophy really that promotes abuse, intolerance, and human rights violations? Because within that institution and that culture, you have Sergeant Small, who comes out here to take the body blows. That's quite insufficient. We can't deal with an institution that is as significant as it is to our everyday lives as the TTPS by having one or two members of the organization coming out and taking body blows and trying to remind us that they're trying, and it is woefully insufficient. So I really need to get to the core of how do we dismantle this philosophy, and how do we work with the TTPS and let the TTPS know that they have to work with us in order to build an organization that delivers the service that it purports to want to deliver. That's my 2 cents for the moment.
You know, I have found that in police services that there's an insistence on the formation of policies to address matters that come up from time to time. And let's say, for example, in England, that policy unit, the policy formation goes directly to the different units of the service and to the training college. So there you could actually measure the progress based on a new policy. So I'm the director, I'm the deputy I'm the deputy director of the Office of Law Enforcement Policy. And it was not until recently that we were actually approached to do a pepper spray policy and some other policies that I can't really describe now. But certainly you need a group of thinkers, a think tank, to identify some of the issues and so on that we'll face from time to time. And you have to put it in policy. Otherwise, we cannot discipline people if there are gray areas in terms of the police service regulations and so on. Now, having said that, what I like to do, I would like to just move on to the other topic. This is police shootings. And I just like to start off by saying that the police job is a very, very hard one. And the rule of thumb in terms of use of force is that you use as much force as is necessary in the circumstances to deal with the threat that you're faced with. In terms of the United Nations Human Rights Charter and so on, they talk about proportionality. So if it is that you're faced with a particular type of threat, then your response as a police officer must be proportionate to the type of threat you face. By way of disclosure, I was also head of investigation at the Police Complaints Authority at one. Made it my business to beg, beseech, ask, everything to have non-lethal use of force. In other words, have equipment that does not result necessarily in the death of a person that the police might engage in. I remember a particular incident in which a female member, the head of the household, the husband, was behaving in an erratic manner because he had a few drinks and so on and so on and so on. Yeah? She called the police because there was a disturbance at the home. And the end result of that, let me jump to the end, was that the police used deadly force and it ended up in the demise of her husband right in front of her very eyes. Now, if it is on the police utility belt, there isn't a taser, there isn't a pepper spray, and all you have is a hammer. Then if a fly comes to the hammer to kill the fly. So the whole question of the use of force impacts directly on people's perception of the police service. We have seen the police service, and this is from a civilian perspective, they have become a bit more militarized. I'm watching the camouflage. I'm hearing one shot, one kill. And immediately as a citizen, I am cringing. So that sets the table for the discussion of the use of force within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service when they interact with the citizens. Any takers?
So I can begin by the incident that occurred last year, which would have been the murders of Israel Clinton, Noel Diamond, and Joel Jacobs, Onella Graves as well, where my organization would have, formed a team of attorneys to represent some of the protesters, as well as one person who was not involved in the protest, but was a victim of police brutality. This person was someone who was going to the police station to get a certificate of character. And even though he stated that, he showed them, the money and whatever, they took him up. And a lot of persons involved in the protest, when they were detained, they were beaten. Now, this is not something new where the use of force, again, going back to the colonial roots, the use of force is something that people don't really pay attention to. And human rights, based on how the police would see a particular community or particular persons, this would be the rule of thumb to bring about whatever justice that they decide that it is. Now, I don't believe that, some police officers do not do the right thing, but this has happened over the years for generations, and it's now being recorded. And that is why a lot of Trinidad and Tobago now stepping up to the plate trying to discuss this issue. And I think that, it is something that has to do with accountability and what actual powers that can reprimand the police force. And when some of the attorneys would have looked at the issue to see, well, okay, what are the demands that we could ask for? The PCA was one, but when we looked at it, it was like the PCA could only gather evidence as well as advice. It was not that, they could conduct their investigation, put everything before the courts as an independent body. They still had to work with other arms who would have interacted with the police officers. The police officers were also not dismissed. They were put on desk duty, still around other police officers, and other police officers would have had to testify against their own. So the level of accountability, if you're looking for that, in terms of your fellow police officer coming in court to testify against you, you will come out to this person, is not something that is gonna really disappear. This is not gonna bring any sort of justice, because these are people that you work with. So it's gonna be something very difficult for us to really establish some sort of accountability. But I believe that starts with the PCA being accessible to the community, people knowing how to make complaints, as well as they having their authority to conduct their own investigations, and as well as not necessarily having to go through the police commissioner or anybody else in the service, but it should be something completely independent, because we reached to a point where that some police officers, depending on who the person is and the amount of connections that they would have had, the PCA really cannot do anything about it. And this is just from our investigation, from actually being a part of the situation and discussing it with persons in the community. So accountability is something that we really need to put into law for us to have, any type of justice when police officers have to gather evidence against other police officers. That's not really making any sense. Because if you work with someone, and depending on the type of relationship that you have with them, it is something that some people would not want to cooperate, even though they might have to, but that is not always the case. So that is just my small contribution based on my experience in the field with that type of stuff.
Ma'am, I don't know if you ever heard about the Professional Standards Bureau. And this is a department within the police service that have a kind of track record that not much police officers fond of at all. Right? The Professional Standards Bureau that was established several years ago have arrested so many police officers and put them before the court. I don't think in an investigation like this that any senior officer going to compromise that investigation for officers that he may not. Because you're saying something broad, and we don't have no evidence that the investigating officer work with any of these officers involved in this activity. And being investigated, I don't want to say too much, because this matter is currently under investigation, and let us wait to see how the investigation unfolds. the evidence, whatever it may be, you know, whether it's witness statements, the lead investigator, I know, will do everything in his power to ensure that if the law was breached, that due process cater for action to be taken. And you know, that is something kind of like straightforward. I just want to also pitch that this modernization and transformation that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service undergoing, one of the strongest things, and I probably want to put a little highlight on this, because I mean, I am a part of the community-oriented policing section, as it is now called COPS, and I feel community policing should be the way forward. This was like the foundation of policing, and somewhere over the years along the line, we had it being introduced into the police service in 1996 by the then Commissioner of Police, Mr. Kenny Mohammed. Then in 2002, another commissioner said, you know, every police officer should embrace the philosophies of community policing and leave it up to them to determine activities that should happen within police station districts related to community policing. Then we had the next commissioner come and say, I mean, we are at a place now, I just want to say that we have a new departmental order, which is a document that is an instructive document to police officers. And the police service is now in a direction where even the executive promotes and see the value and appreciate the value of community policing. And I think this is the direction that cater for the police really to work, because community policing is really a philosophy and is an organizational strategy that promotes partnership again between the police and the people. And one of the things really critical in terms of community policing around the world is organizational transformation, community partnerships, and shared problem solving. So if it is, I mean, these type of platforms is where we identifying some of the problems that exist. And I think we really need to form some action groups. I mean, I want to pitch to you all. We have a new superintendent, Mr. Michael Pierre. Reach out to him and let him know you're interested in working with community policing to help bring about this strong transformation that you all think Trinidad and Tobago need in order for the police and the people to work closer together. So I challenge you all here today. Don't just share concerns and we didn't do anything about it. Let us come together and work towards really bettering our relationship, towards getting even the operational officers trained. And we had a situation where I just joined reference enterprise, because that is a particular area that I would have focused a lot of attention on with other arms of the police service. And it was really a collaborative approach. And that model brought about an 87% reduction in murders in the enterprise community that was experiencing strong gang violence. We had the introduction of the resistance and prevention program. One program, I think the Senate said that program need to remain with the organization no matter who come or go, because it really promoted the police and the community sitting together, developing an action plan and sticking to that action plan. And in some cases, in terms of the engagements, the public felt that you're all trying this, and at the end of the day, we have some other police officers being a little iron fist with us. And we even had to arrange training through the senior officers at that time for even the operations officers to do some training in advanced community policing techniques and how to engage in high-risk communities. And engaging in high-risk communities is not only about an iron fist, because I mean, there are some situations. I work in the task force for many years, and I've been in situations, I witnessed situations where men out here with guns, men out here telling their boy children to hold guns, to sell drugs, and to rise the rifle if need be. So, I mean, there's a false and deceptive sense of love and care and appreciation to these young men that join these gangs. But I think we, as a young man saying, the enterprise community, the police should be a first friend. And we have to work, not only the police, but the police people, to do the things that is necessary to bring about this change that we need to see. So I really want to challenge you all today. Reach out to the executive, reach out to the head of the community policing section, and let us find innovative ways through activities that we could discuss and identify where the police and the people could work together to effectively transform the image of the service and have bring about a reduction in crime in Trinidad and Tobago to make every place safe.
Let me just add something to you to this. I reach out, my organization, the Trinidad and Tobago Transgender Coalition, reach out to your, at the time, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, to some training session at the barracks, cause we charge them $2,000 to do the training, the stigma and discrimination sensitization training. We have no money and we're not interested in paying for no training or nobody. That's the issue. That's what they're going to say. I can't come and train. Now I train the Ministry of Health, the nurses and them that come from different species, faith-based organizations, and I try to work with the various ministries. There must be a cost attached to some of the training. The police is clearly saying we don't have money for that. Our budget, you have to wait till September, and then when September comes, you never hear from them again. Because it's not that we never did try, because as I rightfully said, I have been having members of my community with padded charges, padded charges, 5 and 6 and 7 padded charges on them. And it's unfair. It was really unfair. So we decided to do something and to reach out to the police, to train them so they to understand what is going on and how they're stigmatizing and how they're discriminating and what it is, what stigmatization and discrimination really is for persons along the and education along the spectrum of gender. And that because there was a $2,000 cost attached to this. That and what is $2,000? What really is $2,000 to get a 2-day session and hope that 30 persons could get the information that we want to share?
I'm not telling you what to do. I want to tell them how we do the training free, just to make sure that it be done. But we have a lot of international counterparts that I'm aware of, like the U.S. Embassy, United Nations, that fund, activities. Folade have a good knowledge about how the thing works. So, and that's the importance of networking and sharing and whatever. But I am certain that there are funding available for things like these. I'm sorry that he wasn't able to roll out the training. I think it's something that will benefit us for us to understand your perspective.
But do you think do you think that the LGBTI community, is there any space on your table for working and protecting the LGBTI community? That's my question to you.
I am saying a big yes. Okay. Just the recent establishment of the gender-based violence unit, it shows that to me that the police service in another direction.
Is only male and female. I hope you understand what gender is.
Well, I mean,
because along the spectrum, they don't know the persons who are non-binary. They don't know what transitioning is. They don't have any information with medically transitioning persons, because of your documentation. When they ask you for your national ID, ma'am, where is your ID? You could do any surgery in the world and your national ID is male. You know what that says, okay? Because the gender mark on your documentation will always be male. You know how they're going to address you to start with.
Well, I mean, that is more
because your ID card say so and so, and your gender is male is Mr. So and so, and but the kid here, and you can't get them wrong, because they will misgender you for spite, because your national ID says this, and they do. Well, I'm just doing my job. That's how ridiculous it really is.
If I may, there's a philosophy now, and you see, I think that this needs a deeper philosophical engagement. Now, in different parts of the world, by comparative analysis, there's what they call civilian oversight of law enforcement as a philosophy. And that is based on the fact that the police can form a fraternity association on socialization and so on, that can really make them into a tight unit. There's the concept of us and them and so on, which seem to harden that type of fraternity. So in Trinidad and Tobago, that was the philosophy behind civilian oversight of law enforcement. Thus, the PCA was born. In Jamaica, you have NACOL and INDICOM, sorry, in North America, you have NACOL and so on. Because there is always the risk. While we understand the Professional Standards Bureau, we know internal affairs in other countries and so on, it was found that even though as well-intentioned as they are, it doesn't necessarily guarantee a person a fair shake who has complained against the police service. So this is why you have civilian overseeing the police service. And if you remember, if you go back towards my opening statement, you see the amount of police power that the police has. They can citizen. So in the face of all that power, it is necessary to have civilian looking over. And this is oversight that we're doing here. We are in fact engaging in police service. And while I appreciate Mr. Small and his enthusiasm, especially, yeah. You can see he's well versed. He means well, yes. His odd proposition is very, very strong, but the reality of it may be such that people who suffer hurt, loss, or injury at the hands of the police may not necessarily always feel that they get a fair shake, whether it's from the Professional Standards Bureau, the PCA, or the police disciplinary section. So when you talk about use of force, especially, and most of the time, that's what the complaint is about, you know. The police engagement with the citizen was such that the person feels as though that they've suffered some hurt, loss, and injury at the hands of the police. Anybody want to take that further? So, well, in that case, then, sorry, yes. So, the issue of sorry, somebody saying something?
I was about to say that
Yes.
we face with this dilemma. Not why dilemma, a serious dilemma, right? In that the narrative of when it had a shootout, when the dust cleared, only one sector dead, right? So much so for these men on the street, right? And the shooting skills. I think we come to accept when one of us who in crime and delinquency and shippiness get killed, you doesn't see no real outcry. I think you could see that justice from our people in the street. We just come to understand, hey, look, this man in the game, this man in the crime, he get licked down, to talk in plain language, he get licked down. I think when we see like what happened in Mova and with innocent people, we see the same behavior. And it's that same behavior in specific communities what has caused these things, right? And here the dilemma that we will face. At what point men might decide when they hear it's police or they see an officer coming out with a gun in his hand, right? To question them. At what point will they decide, hey, that is real police or that is not real police? Let me shoot first. And I'm not inciting anything here, but that is a decision going on in men's mind as we speak. Because at the end of the day, the same split decision the police have, okay, and which we must appreciate and understand, okay, because the institution now, look at the disrespect to the institution, you know, that men now could pose as police. You know, that is the highest level of disrespect. Men could, on broad daylight, on Ryson Road, in a state of emergency, make attempt on men's life. That is a disrespect to law and order, and I accept that, right? So I think, Mr. Small, I will vote for you, seriously. But here what happened. I wish it didn't have this conflict with these two men and these set of commissioners, and it had a real commissioner, so we could get a real commissioner, whoever that would be, to come and take these body blows you get. Because when Ms. Folade and Adeola and Brandy and Mr. Meiguel finished with you, I don't know, Might I take your vest? I don't know. Right? I hope that there is a pathway for somebody with your thought pattern to be elevated in the service, and that you do have to have a political godfather.
You know, Jamaal, you know, the history of the development of violence in Jamaica was based on exactly what you said, you know, a cycle of the violence developed in such a way where police become fair game, and it seemed to be an all of war, it seemed, yes? And we in Trinidad here, we ought to avoid that, and we can't avoid it. With people like Small and so on, I mean, but we just have to dive deeper than merely to say, well, here what, this is what we ought to do and so on, and really and truly have policy shift, policy perspective, where the young man who goes into the barracks, you tell him, forget about one shot, one kill, yes? Tell him that you have to use proportionality in order to, yes? Because I am disturbed by that, being a law enforcement professional who was in the front line. I was in front line, you wouldn't believe the front line I'm talking about. But you'll never hear a true commissioner, Mr. Small, I'm sure you wouldn't tell your young charges, one shot, one kill, and put them in a frame of mind where they're leaning forward and thinking that the others are the enemy and so on. And they, you know, what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, that statement was regarding a particular scenario, but it doesn't, on a broad brush scale, incite all police officers. Police officers have some sense to, you know. We wouldn't just say
report it so often. They would repeat
one
it
shot, one kill, and you just go out there killing people. It's not about that. That was in reference. I believe that statement was in reference to. I'm not saying it right or wrong, but I know it was a specific statement in reference to a specific sensor activity where the police face with a shootout situation. It was a matter saying that we train, we skill, we will outgun you if need be in a situation relating to where a person pointing a firearm at a police. But I don't think it was a broad brush situation. I'm not saying, as I say, is right or wrong, but I'm not going out there and say, I'm not going to encourage my officers to say who working with me in community policing. Or I don't think any other officer would go out and say, go out and shoot everybody. See, that is not, you know, all I know that was in reference to a specific situation, a specific scenario describing a shootout between police and civilian. And, you know, if it is we to really work as a society to help change the mindset of people, I don't think a young man on the street, I mean, they wouldn't probably even be walking around with firearm if it is we be as effective as we can be. And I know with the people just in this room here, people like Mr. Shabazz, Ms. Folade, who I know personally, I know we could do a great work together. And, you know, we have a model to showcase. And I want to say the enterprise model, and I want to draw a reference. I want to just touch on the heart here this evening a little bit. So, a few officers I met when doing a walkabouts in the enterprise community, there were officers who were once civilians telling me that, boy, you know, I really had a perception of the police. My interaction with the police in my community had me hating the police over the years. And I met you, and you know I want to become a police, and I want to draw a reference to an officer by the name of Adrian Silly, who is one of the best officers we have now in the police service. And it's such a touching thing for me personally to know how Adrian really wasn't too fond of the police before he actually came into the organization. And it was because of his bad experiences and encounters. I'm in a place now where we could change that. And if it is I were able to influence one person and cause that change to happen in terms of the mindset, I am saying that it could be done throughout Trinidad and Tobago. We have so many schools, we have so many children, we engage them daily, and we try to really foster a genuine relationship with them. Show them that we genuinely care. Show them that we love and appreciate them. And you know, it is all part of the ongoing transformation of the organization. And I can speak for myself and for the officers that I work with and for the wider population of police officers, that we, with a genuine heart, will sacrifice our lives. If it would have a home invasion or any crime happening now, and police have that information, we're not going to sit down and say, let them do what they want and let them kill innocent people and the police going to act. Whether we like it or not, we're going to act. So we just have to really foster and promote partnership, get more officers involved in terms of embracing the philosophies and the ideology behind the fact that the police cannot police the society without partnering with them. The police are the people, and the people are the police. So I just want to really promote that and say that let us not focus on the negative, but work on or come up with solutions, come up with strategies, come up with an approach of how we can transform not only the police service but the country and the mindset of some of the people, because culturally we have a lot of people like, look, I see something today, I don't want to talk too much on it, but we as leaders in society have to lead by example, and we can't be condemning people to in regards to things that they're doing, and we come back and do worse than what they're doing. We have to lead and lead by example, good example.
I would just say that if the rhetoric, and I understand the rhetoric, the then commissioner, the thing was way out of hand. He come in, he go to the extreme to bring it back. But with the one kill, one shot, one kill, and the cockroach talk. But the narrative should also be that police officers who rogue and engage in the same activities are cockroaches too, right? And you see, cockroaches now should be characterized. White color cockroach, this color, cockroach, 5% cockroach, and so the narrative had to go across the board. The other thing about, I agree with you, because I want to be a police when I look at you, but I want to be a police that arrest politicians. You understand? Because I think part of the solution in this discussion about hotspots, about police killings, a lot of it is also centered in political will. The will of a leadership, the will of a government, the will of a politician, to really do his right for a community to balance scales. Because right now the scales imbalance. I am a football coach. Let me get the analysis. We are the bottom of a hill kicking a ball up a hill, a steep hill, and the goalpost up on the steep hill. The ball will never reach up. The ball will never reach up. This thing imbalance, and the political will to address this imbalance, okay, I feel certain will help in this whole hotspots, criminal activity, police killing situation.
With regards to those utterances, sometimes I read somewhere where they say much that can well be thought of cannot always wisely be said. And I rest that there to go into the other topic. So what would a safe community represent for us? Where human rights are respected, where people are allowed to flourish, where opportunities are there for all, regardless of class, regardless of status. Justice is blind. She doesn't care who comes before us. She cannot see who comes before us, but everything is just. What kind of society do we want in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, I can begin by saying that, one of our main issues is accountability. And if you don't have accountability, there will always be rogue persons. There will always be people who would not obey the law. Once we have a strong system of accountability, social protection, as well as the recognition of human rights across the board in policies, in schools, as something that, leadership in all areas look at human rights and see what we're doing and how we're addressing certain things in a political way as well as a social way, and also having a network and not only for one person to be speaking for others in terms of political leaders, but really having them honest conversations with communities about what changes they need to see done, and also being meaningful and just when it says that you are, making these changes, because I believe that, sometimes a lot of people will come and say, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and we believe that you need this. And, when look at this situation that's taking place with the PSC right now, whenever it has to do with something important, we see that, there's always some sort of bacchanal, there's always some sort of this and that, then an attorney would come out and say, well, this is not the way you're supposed to do this. So I think that we really need to come together and decide what exactly the ways in which we're going to deal with these certain situations, and also lead with research. There's also a divide between intellectuals as well, in terms of intellectuals and the communities, and in terms of intellectuals and leadership. People decide on things without doing proper research and stuff like that. And I think that that is a way in which we can have a peaceful community by truly understanding what it is that we need to do and coming together to do that. But that's a difficult thing.
But is our society, is it so, does it have so many, I mean, dichotomies between groups, because we are a plural society, between groups, between classes and so on, that it makes it almost impossible to have any fairness within the community. Inbuilt is that degree of unfairness that would not allow us really and truly. We always have grouses, always have fights. We feel that the police is there to maintain the status quo, and the status quo does not favor us. Is that something that really would prevent us from reaching that utopia?
I mean, there are racial inequalities as well as the major economic inequality, and that is something that, you know, vulnerable communities is something that measures the progress of a society. And if we look at our society, the wealth gap is increasing. We look at the prices increasing, salaries not increasing. So, and we're not thinking about diversifying the economy, even though I dislike that word, because we always talk about diversifying. We always talk about the youths, and nobody actually listens to the youths. When it says that we will come on these forums and stuff like that, but are they really employing us in certain positions for us to make a change, or are they truly listening to what we have to say about anything? That is not happening. So yes, there will be racial divides and stuff like that, and a lot of that is purported by political leaders. If it is that we have a grassroots approach, which is what my organization truly does in leadership, and that political will to really look at vulnerable communities and actually go to communities and actually have these conversations and actually make policies to make them being a part of it, not just you leading and saying, well, this is what I think you need. Listening to persons as well is something that no one person has the monopoly on all the information. But if it is that we do have a partnership between community and leaders and actually have accountable people in places of leadership, I think that it could work. But there's always going to be divides. Every society has it. There's always going to be that. But the ways in which we choose to understand our society and choose to have accountability, that will make us different from other societies.
I think also on that question of justice and being just, I think that is so critical, because when you look at the story in the Bible with Jesus talking to the multitude, and he had 5 little fishes and 2 loaves of bread, or the other way around. I don't know the story too well. But no way in the Bible did it say that the people left disgruntled and angry. And in our own consciousness, we can see 5 little fishes and 2 loaves of bread feeding a multitude. So we come to understand from that wherever it had there to eat, the people were satisfied that Jesus dealt with it justly, and in their heart, they feel a sense of assurance, right? This thing people like to say who have, right? That teach a man to fish, you feed him for a day, and give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. That is nonsense when it comes to us, because we so hungry, we go eat the bait and poison ourselves, right? With us, you have to set up the whole industry. And this is the second imbalance. We have to set up an industry because we have, everybody else get a chance, Men used to sell clothes. They have big buildings, big industry. Men say they do things other than selling clothes, but they get blind. Men get rich, the children get rich, they stay from cutting cane and selling rum, right? Other people say Dolce didn't cut no cane, right? But they get a chance, right? Men say they get rich off of selling Oriental food. People say otherwise, they get a chance. What happened to this last tribe, this Eric Williams tribe? this Makandal Daga tribe. What happened? Where's the chance for them to get an industry? And who will help them to create that industry? You know, and this is the thing. And so we set up a parallel society in the underworld. This is what we do in the community, you know, with our own justice, our own economic situation, right? We set up a parallel society because we get pushed out. The last thing we had, and I'm a Muslim, but the last thing we had play way, we had way, or let's take it and make it play way. You understand? So the least, all the opportunities we take. Look at the men with the susu, take everything. Now they're going to legalize marijuana just now. And who family going to benefit? And all of us get locked up, we get beat up, we get brutalized. So all how you're taking it, you know, nothing is there for this child of Eric Williams. And this is the problem in the society that is happening, you know, because watch, those who have feel that they will just stay and have, but a moment of desperation has come. And in the same way, we set up a parallel underworld society, it will start to spill out in the other communities. And I'm saying this, again, emotional, and I think I should stop here.
Yeah. You know, if it is, this country earns revenues and so on from its natural resources and so on. And if we started off speaking about hotspots and so on, in order to fix those hotspots, you may have to inject resources into them. And in a plural society where you have many ethnicities and so on, you make yourself vulnerable to the accusation that you're taking the country's resources and directing it to a particular group, right? And they say, no, as a fair society requires that, you know, that everybody have an equal opportunity. But is it that, I mean, you have in a horse race, you have a mule that is so far behind that can never catch up? Is that a fair analogy?
I think that it's not just a question of the mule being so far behind, but in trying to unpack this situation, I mean, it's interesting we're talking about, you know, what does a peaceful society look like? But the mule didn't get to be at the end of the pack all by itself. The mule was placed at the end of the pack from the beginning. So, and it takes us back to the first part of your conversation, Mr. Moderator, when you opened up about the hotspot communities. I always find it interesting that we talk about hotspot communities, and that is in the context of chaos and confusion and violence and crime. And we don't talk about hotspot communities in the context of hot innovation, in the context of the courage and the resistance of the people in these communities to survive and to thrive despite being the mule that was placed at the end from the beginning, you know? And so I don't know that we can, and certainly don't have the time, that we can deconstruct this situation in the time that we have, because the oppression that the mule has experienced over time is an oppression that has been set aside for the mule. And even the police as an institution has been organized to oppress the mule, so that the mule is always going to need more. And as Brother Shabazz says, it's not a question of, what is it, give the fish or teach the fish. There's something about equity, that some people, including mules, will always need more. They do not start off from the same place. And so the moment we start talking about certain populations in this society, we need to allow ourselves to go right back to our beginnings. We didn't start off the same place. And as Brother Shabazz says, we don't get a blight either. What we get is the brunt of the disparaging remarks and the rejection and the marginalization of the society. And because the society, that is a society that has evolved out of violence, but has done so much to try to escape that history and not face it frontally and deal with it and put some of our demons to rest, that mule remains the place and the space where all of our hatred and our violence and our human rights abuses will be lodged. So that discussions like this really need to be deeper, need to be part of a deeper unmasking, because we've had these discussions over time, because the mule has always been where the mule is. And so, I want to say I stand with my brother Shabazz, and I love my brother JC. He knows it, and I'm always very proud of him, and I have an understanding of what you're trying to do, my brother. It is admirable, but there's too much more that we need to take and to manage and to take charge of. I think as a population, one of the issues you have with the police service is what you have in all of our public institutions, including our government and the parliament. It's a business of governance. It's a governance that locks us out, and therefore but certainly my personal struggle over years, as Brother Shabazz would know, because it's similar to his, and the work of my organization has been really to chip away and peel away at the structures that lock us out as citizens. We have a right to have meaningful participation in a formalized way into decision-making in our public institutions. That's the struggle right there. You know, there's nothing about come and talk and help us, and no. I'm not helping you to build anything because it's mine. So that we are going to build it, but we're going to build it together, not by you inviting me to come in, but by you recognizing that I have a right to walk with you hand in hand. And I have got to do that work really to position myself there and to remind you and to demand that you open up the spaces and to show you how it can be done. So that, yeah, thanks very much, Womantra. Congratulations on this effort. And thanks for the opportunity to be part of the discussion this evening.
Thank you. I just want to encourage you all to again and welcome you all to work with our police youth clubs. We have in Trinidad and Tobago probably a membership of over 7,000 children, and the purpose of the youth clubs is really to focus on core developmental areas like education, sports, culture, and it's really an opportunity for us to mold the minds of our young people. And I want to encourage you all to, reach out to us. We have a community-oriented policing headquarters in Riverside Plaza on the 5th floor. And I want to encourage citizens, I want to encourage persons from this group right here to come meet with Superintendent P and his administration, Inspector Martin, Sergeant Duncan. They are all passionate like myself to bring about this change. And in terms of activities that could be done, I think our section COPS is the right department or the right arm of the police service to foster this type of collaboration and partnership that we could engender to bring about change. So thank you, Womantra, for the opportunity. I wasn't expecting to be in a platform or in an environment like this, but community policing, as my good friend Mr. Field said, is the heart of policing. So I happy that we was able to share. I was able to experience and hear firsthand somebody hurt in terms of how people feel, and it's just a matter of people had some bad experiences and they felt hurt. I had all share experience. I didn't go into real details, but we all taught in something that highlighting the fact that we need to come to the round table and work together to be the change that we want to see. Thank you all very much for the opportunity.
San Small, you have been in the hot seat. And if it is I come over as being disrespectful or too provocative, I do apologize because you and I. No, wait, just a second. Let me say this quick, right? Because I have a similar history like you, and my passion, I think, is only matched by yours. Mr. Pierre, he happens to be a good friend of mine. And to get this society to where we want it for our young people and so on, this is the type of passion that we need. And Shabazz and they will tell you that we do Hearts and Minds, we do Move Alive Until Initiative and so on. I am right there with you. But as moderator in the other hat, yes, I will provoke you.
And I appreciate that.
But you handled it well, and I must commend you. I must commend you. You handled it well, yes?
I want to say thank you
I would
very
like
much
to
for
thank
inviting
all the
me,
participants.
and also Sergeant Small, Allan Meiguel, all the rest of the panelists. I really appreciate the fact that I could share my opinion and spend the time. It was necessary, and I would also want to commit to moving forward. We have this training policy. We have this material in place, and we would like to share it in terms of sensitization and training for stigma and discrimination, in terms of gender, and for the laws that prohibits, and create some of the issues and challenges that we faces. So I think I would definitely be in touch. I'll have a board meeting and we could share some information, because that is part of what the TTC is all about, moving forward and embracing each other.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to everyone. I think I've organized like a few panels before, and I think this is my favorite one so far. Thank you to all of our panelists on behalf of the organization. Thank you to Allan Meiguel. You were a wonderful moderator. And I really appreciate, the engagement that everyone showed. And I mean, like after everybody's, presentations, I'm just like, okay, so are we gonna form a political party? Are we gonna form a coalition? What are we gonna do? I'm ready to go. And I really think that this is kind of, another point along the journey, because Folade would have, made an important intervention in that this is kind of continuing work that would have been done in the past. So, in terms of like us as a, young feminist organization, contributing to that work and then working with all of y'all on possible future endeavors. I think it's something that's really wonderful, and I'm just so happy to share this time in the present with all of y'all. So yeah, I mean, I look forward to working with everyone, and thank you so much for your engagement tonight.
Welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Good meeting everybody.
Bye-bye. I'll be in touch with everyone soon.
Thank you.
So yeah, good night, everyone. Thank you to our viewers who are here with us. I appreciate you all as well for the comments and the questions. And we'll look out for more on our social media platform. So I'm gonna end the broadcast now.
Bye.